We are now going to start with Part 2. Part 2's theme is orchestral activities and their connection with society. We are going to have a keynote speech and panel discussion. The keynote speaker is Ms. Elena Rahona from the United States. She is a founding executive director of a New York Late Starters String Orchestra. Please welcome Ms. Rahona.
Now, konnichiwa. I'm very honored to be here, and likewise, this is the first time I'm presenting to royalty. It is a huge honor to be here, and I thank you for that. I would like to acknowledge our guests and our hosts, and in particular, Her Imperial Highness, Princess Takamoto, the JAO Honorary President, also Dr. Kawasaku, the Governor of Shizuoka Prefecture, Mr. Camino, the President of NPO-WFAO, and Mr. Yabuda, Chairman of the Shizuoka Prefectural Assembly. Thank you so much for having me here. The world needs more leaders like you who understand the critical role music can have in fostering happy and healthy communities. Okay, so I'm going to start by reading a quote that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. It was given as a commencement address by a dean at a well-known music conservatory in the US. And he goes on to say, if we were a medical school and you were here as a med student practicing appendectomies, you'd take your work very seriously because you would imagine that some night at 2 a.m., someone's going to waltz into your emergency room and you're going to have to save a life. Well, my friends, someday at 8 p.m., someone is going to walk into your concert hall and bring you a mind that is confused, a heart that is overwhelmed, and a soul that is weary. Whether they go out whole again will depend partly on how well you do your craft. This quote makes me weep because I know how true it is. We all do. Music does save lives, and making music is that important. We need to talk about it more, and we need to find ways to demonstrate this more. And the only way we can do it is if we find ways to integrate music making into more people's lives. I'm actually here with you now while in the middle of a really big family health crisis. And I've been struggling to deal with it. In the midst of all of the chaos and sadness, I've been sitting in my living room and drawing bows across my violin. I've been pulling out old pieces and scratching out thin, solitary lines of music, one at a time. At my low intermediate level, I do not make sounds like a professional or high-level amateur. There are no sweeping notes that are filling the room with lushness. And on the contrary, my thin tone can easily come across as lonely. Except it's not. And this is where the magic begins. The magic that all of us in this room deeply understand and desperately want others to feel too. Because in my head and in my heart and in my bones, vibrating with the frequency of each note, is the power of all of my fellow orchestra musicians. Their sound is ringing in my ears as if they're standing right along with me. And when I play, wedged between my couch and the little table with my silver lamp, I hear my orchestra accompanying me and supporting me. When I play, even by myself, I'm not alone. And I feel this way because I have had the privilege of playing with others, the privilege to know how it feels to be making music with others. And that's made all the difference. I'm a mediocre player because I started playing as an adult. But very, very early in my music-making journey, right when I started playing with others, out of this jumble of noise and horribly out of tune and out of time playing, something profound and unexpected bubbled up. We were all in this together, earnestly working to make something beautiful and to create something bigger than each of us alone. And it didn't matter how flawed our playing was, and in fact, that made it even more moving and sublime. Because we were given the space and the latitude to not be perfect, the space to be human. There is nothing more universal. It is our most basic and primal need to feel human, which in turn makes us feel valued and feel like we matter. Playing music should not be considered a privilege. And I, as do many of you, dream about a world where everyone, and this is the key, at every level, age, and demographic, has easy access to making music with others. Imagine how different the world would be. And if you can't imagine it, in the next few minutes, I'm going to help you do so. This talk is a reminder to reconnect with and embrace the side of music that makes us human. The joy-filled, sorrow-filled, rage-filled, ferocious, enchanting, and most importantly, raw, imperfect, and mistake-prone beings that we are, and everything that music is. I'm also going to be talking about ways that we can expand how we talk about and approach the benefits of making music, especially amateur music. Because it is time that we start thinking more boldly and unconventionally about the potential for amateur music groups to make the world a better place. Orchestras have the opportunity to hugely influence the way we approach life, especially amateur orchestras, and especially where opportunities to join are plentiful, and again, where everyone, regardless of age, income, or ability, can find a group to join. Like many, I grew up with the narratives of go big or go home. Create disruption in earth-shattering ways if you want to change the world. But as I fully embrace middle age, I realize how misguided these standards are. There's no big idea or project that's going to solve what's wrong with the world. And in fact, we already know what's good for us. Our lives don't hinge on massive overhauls. What makes or breaks us and what's reflected in how we treat our community and environment are our daily spheres of interactions, those shared moments of vulnerability and tiny moments of connection that make us realize that we are all on this journey around the sun together. And so to me, there's immeasurable power in any program whose essence distills to acceptance, tolerance, and the pursuit of happiness for happiness's sake. As mentioned, I'm the founding executive director of the New York Late Starter String Orchestra, or NILSO, a group myself and a colleague founded in 2007 because, quite simply, making music makes me happy. And I wanted others to be happy too. Think about some of the times you were filled with joy and how alive and human you felt. And think about how many of those times involved music. We're more inclined to build community, to listen to and support others, and ultimately to cooperate when we have things in our lives that make us happy. Not to mention, as I often remind people, you can't have happy children if you don't have happy adults. NPO is a group of adult beginner and recently returning musicians who eagerly dive into music making, knowing full well that mistakes will be made, and many of them. We aim to position novice music makers as vital contributors to a healthy and diverse cultural landscape, to destigmatize this group of musicians. We lead by example to dismantle society's unrealistic reverence for perfection by prioritizing joy and connection. There are basically 3 types of musicians that come to our group. We have those who are brand new to music, never touched an instrument, don't know what a whole note is, a rest, nothing, brand new, which is where I started. Then we have those who already play or played an instrument but want to switch to a new one. And then we have those that played a long time ago and stopped. In many cases, it's because opportunities significantly decline as participants age and remaining resources get streamlined into refining talent. So opportunities to play for less experienced players start to disappear. And these players go off, they raise families, careers, study, all of that. But then they want to come back to something they loved, often after decades of not playing. So they come to us from these different roads, different backgrounds, different experiences, but the one thing they all have in common is their bravery. It takes a lot to put yourself out there as an adult and to be in a room with your peers as you do something at a level that's less than where you want to be. And as you all know very well, instruments, and especially strings, are pretty unforgiving, and it is not always pretty. But it is exceptionally beautiful. In terms of audiences, for our group, it's less how many people come to listen versus how many people come to experience, to play, to share space, laughter, and pride with the musicians. It's not about leaving the audience with soaring notes and precisely timed interweaving arpeggios, but with the inspiration and enthusiasm to see things a little differently. We're all aware of some of the more cited research on the benefits of making music. For adults, for example, making music helps stave off dementia, helps with memory, maintaining physical dexterity. If you notice what seems to happen a lot, and especially when talking about older adults and music, is that the focus tends to be on individual well-being. We don't usually translate these benefits, all be they wonderful, up and out to the larger community. It is a little different with music groups for children or young adults, where the benefits are sometimes considered with the larger picture in mind. Development of cultural awareness, team building, sometimes safer streets are mentioned. However, the vast majority of programs I've come across, and especially in the West, are much more likely to first highlight, once again, individual gains. Playing music will improve your child's academic performance, enhance their memory, make them more likely to get into college or a good job. We live in a world that's increasingly ruled by perfection, where success is measured in how high we, as individuals, climb ladders in the size of our personal bank accounts, in productivity, whatever that means. This creates a lot of pressure and a lot of misery. From my admittedly small perch in New York City, what I've observed over and over again is that how we frame music participation activities, whether consciously or not, frequently conforms to these ideals of getting ahead and being productive. We lead with how amateur orchestras, and particularly youth orchestras, are stepping stones to bigger and better things. Play music with us. You'll be smarter, stronger, more desirable. Rarely do we lead with, playing music makes you happier, and how this, in turn, makes you more inclined to treat others and the planet better. Our world has become just as much about materialism and power as compassion and solidarity. And if we want any hope of thriving in the chaotic future of climate and health disruption that lies ahead, we need to reconnect with our collective humanness. Music takes us back to our roots. As we all know, we are at a critical juncture. The realities of the pandemic and the looming environmental crisis mean that many high-level conversations are happening about how we shape the future. Our job, by virtue of being here, is to do all that we can to be a part of those conversations. How do we position amateur music making as critical to community well-being, to give politicians as many reasons as possible to fund amateur orchestras at a higher level? Maybe it means shifting how we first describe or present music to outsiders. One way is to consider leading with joy when we talk about the benefits of making music. I'm not saying there's not a place for breathtaking precision in music. It is still an amazing experience to hear it. And striving to play that Mozart piece just a little bit better next time should clearly be a goal to set and achieve. What I am asking, however, is how do we broaden the way we see the amateur orchestra? Is it a group that performs in a concert hall? Or can it be an entity that expands to accommodate multiple groups of multiple abilities, ages, and incomes? How is your orchestra set up, and can it create a pathway for less experienced players to join? We all know that classical music struggles with reputations of elitism. Maybe it's in part because we have a tendency to hide the less experienced players, particularly when they're adults. But what if we mainstreamed and showcased more multi-level, inclusive groups, and not just the good ones? We need more people. We need people to more thoroughly understand that the benefits of amateur orchestra is as much about providing more opportunities to play as it is providing more opportunities to observe. Not to mention, politicians may have a hard time relating to elite players, but if they see more diversity in playing levels, they're more inclined to imagine themselves playing. This experience becomes more relatable, more universal, if you will. This is how we need to think more boldly. Can we create and promote events, initiatives, concerts, flash mobs, in more diverse spaces, and that accommodate more diverse players and audiences? incorporate music performance into community events in creative ways, performances that de-emphasize perfection and value connections and joyous interactions. Do not underestimate the power of joy that comes from both listening to and playing music with others. My friends and I have a joke that I can solve all of the Sustainable Development Goals via the happiness and humanity of amateur music making, ending hunger, happy people who feel connected to others, look out for their neighbors and feed them, reducing consumption. When you're having so much fun through music and connecting with others in new ways, material goods take a step back. I do joke, but only partially, because these connections to all of the SDGs, and not just the obvious ones, are not that far off from what is possible. We just have to start articulating them, and most importantly, demonstrating them. So how do we do this? Why not play a piece at an art opening about the human condition? Or better yet, commission local amateur artists to create an exhibit in a public square that explores the expression of joy, and then play at that opening. This is what I mean when I say pursue unconventional collaborations and initiatives. Find ways to draw others in from disparate fields. Is your town hosting a food festival? Curate an event where people present the recipes that make them happy, and have a multi-level orchestra joyously playing small snippets of pieces that complement their stories. Draw the audience in and make them feel part of the event. Talk about how music, food, and joy nurture body and soul. Highlight the composition of your orchestra, and explain the diversity of its members. I promise you that their joy and enthusiasm will more than make up for their imperfect playing. As I mentioned earlier, if there's a future of wellness, mutual respect, and compassion, I don't believe it will be a big, shiny object or project that will get us there. It will be someone like me, someone like you, someone like your grandmother, child, partner, coming together in a town square, one note at a time, to create common ground based on joy, inclusivity, and humanity. How we do this will be up to us. How do we make sure that the right people listen to us? And how can we use our own orchestras to create initiatives that welcome all players and bring all people together? Arigato.
Rahona様、どうもありがとうございました。
Applause to appreciate Elena's presentation. Rahona-san, please, she will join in the panel discussion after this. So we will go to panel discussion 2. And the theme is orchestral activities and their connection with society. We have 4 panelists to discuss this matter. Moderator is, just like in part 1, Mr. Joe Yamaji.
Hello again, my name is Joe Yamaji. The first part of the discussion focused on youth. In the second part, as the youth grow up and become adults. So orchestras are becoming more diverse and include a wide variety of people. Orchestra naturally cannot ignore their relationship with society. Therefore, I would like to consider the connection between the orchestra and society. Let us introduce 4 big bosses as panelists in this session. The term big boss is now very popular in Japan, especially in Japanese professional baseball. Okay, from right to left, Jan from Belgium, and then Helge from German, and Takeshi from Japan, and Elena, our keynote speaker. As well as the first panel discussion, I have already asked the 4 panelists 3 questions before. Then I have already received their feedback on them. So I will ask the panelists to introduce those as we proceed. Let's get started. First question is, for society, what kind of contribution can orchestral activities make? For society, what kind of contribution can orchestral activities make? Let me start with a presentation on this issue by Jan, please.
Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Elena, for the beautiful speech. Well, I definitely think orchestral activities can have a great impact on society. They can be a tool, really, to build a warmer, diverse, and inclusive society. The European Music Council, they have published a document, it's called the European Agenda for Music. And in that document, they look at music in 3 different ways. The first way is they look at music as an art form, which is obvious, I think. But they also look at music as a tool. And the third way is they look at music as a product. Now, it's clear that orchestras, professional and amateur, approach music as an art form. That's very obvious. So many beautiful compositions have been written and exciting projects have been performed over the years. But where professional orchestras focus on this music as an art form, we as amateur orchestras can focus on music as a tool. As there have been many examples this afternoon. So I think that is our unique selling position, marketeers would say. It's our unique position. We're very unique in that, I think. So, many examples have been given. Music can be very good for your well-being, for individuals. So I'm not going to repeat those. It can also make a society a better and a warmer society. There are many ways to do that. Elena already mentioned a couple of them, but cooperation is really very important in this. You can collaborate with many organizations in your local society. Those can be schools, those can be retirement homes, youth organizations, libraries. It can be anything, actually. And by going out, not only you give color to society, you get in the picture, you are being seen by collaborating, and you win souls for what you do. I think we all know that playing music together is very important and it's very beneficial for people, for society, but society has to be convinced or part of it, and governments, etc. And by going out, going on the street, getting out of the concert hall, it's I think, a good way to do that, to show the world what we do is really valuable. So in VLAMO, VLAMO is the association for music orchestras and musicians in Belgium, in the northern part of Belgium, the Flemish part. And every year we reach out, we present a VLAMO award, we call it, for orchestras who create initiatives who are creatively and artistically. It should be something really exciting, not a usual concert. It should be a bit exceptional. People, you have to surprise people, you have to take people, you have to win the hearts of people with your project. That's one thing, so music as an art form. But on the other hand, the second element is you have to have an impact on society. It doesn't have to be big. It can be a small project. It can be the local society. It doesn't have to impact the whole world at once. It's not necessary. But if you are creatively and you have an impact by, for example, collaborating with other organizations, yeah, you have a chance of winning this award. And it's just not the award. The award is something, yeah, it's just the cherry on the pie. It's the whole process, of course, that comes before and after. So we try to coach the orchestras at several times during the process. First, we select them. It's a very simple procedure. They just have to send us an email with their project, and a first selection is made. Then we invite the orchestras. We have a talk. We give feedback. We listen to them. They listen to us. We try to learn from each other and try to improve the projects they have sent in. And yeah, we also give them some financial support during that whole process. And yeah, and at the end, one orchestra can win this award, as I said, as a cherry on the pie. So that's one way to how we try to encourage orchestras to think in that double way. So that's what I wanted to talk about this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Now let's freely talking about Jan's presentation. I'll give you 4 minutes for you. Who will speak first? Helge?
Yeah, the question is if you, with your experience as the VLAMO organization, which joins not only symphonic and chamber orchestras, but a larger crowd of orchestras and amateur artists, does it create an added value in terms of how to focus on the impact that amateur musicians may have to the society? Is it important to join with other art forms in one organization? What is your impression and what is your experience on that?
Well, yeah, it's true. We support all kinds of organizations of orchestras. Everybody with a heart for music is welcome in VLAMO, and I think it is it has some benefits. Orchestras look at each other. A wind band looks at a symphony orchestra, and they learn from each other because they're in the same group of orchestras. They watch each other's projects. They visit each other. And wind orchestras, in Belgium, they have a long history. They have a long tradition of playing music. Of course, every village has its wind orchestra, and for wind orchestras, the social element before and after the rehearsal is a very important part. For our symphony orchestras, they're more focused on the music. So that's maybe something that can be learned from wind orchestras. And the other way around, the wind orchestras can also learn a lot of the symphony orchestras, of course. But it's about connecting, and maybe that's an important word I didn't mention yet. But it's about connecting individuals, connecting orchestras, connecting with outside organizations, connecting with society. So I think, yes, it makes it richer to be together.
Elena, do you have any comments or questions?
Hello. I agree in connection and how important that is, not only within the orchestra itself, but with society, and how important that is.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. This question is also very similar to the first one. The second question is for society, why are orchestral activity necessary? So let me start with a presentation on this issue by Helge from German, I'm sorry, please.
Well, I want to try to find a simple answer. Orchestra and amateur orchestra activities are necessary for the society because the amateur orchestras provide a unique and an essential contribution to the society. Nobody else than orchestras can provide certain contribution. Let me show that with some examples. Of course, in commercial industry, it's called the unique selling points. And the amateur orchestras, as said before, they want, first of all, to make music, and nobody thinks, first of all, about the unique selling points. But when talking about the contribution to the society and why orchestras are necessary, we have to think about that. And of course, we also have the professional orchestras, not only the amateurs. And the question raises, why do we need amateur orchestras if we have professional orchestras? Can they do everything better with higher quality? Yes, of course, they can do. But by quantity, we have much more amateur orchestras, except, for example, in Germany. To give you some figures, we have about 130 professional symphonic and chamber orchestras in Germany, but we have about 900 amateur symphonic and chamber orchestras. By ratio, 1 professional by more than 5 amateur orchestras. So the amateur orchestras provide the basic cultural services to our society, not only in the big cities like Berlin or like Munich, but even in the rural areas or in smaller cities. So this is an important contribution to our cultural life, which nobody else can provide than the amateur orchestras. And what are these unique contributions? Elena already mentioned these Sustainable Development Goals. Yesterday in our first workshop, we discussed these development goals. The United Nations has set up these development goals in 2015 in order to be achieved until 2030. Now it's almost half time on the way to 2030. It's a good break to look backward. What do we have achieved? What do we contribute? And what will remain left to be done for the next 8 years? And so these 70 goals provide a good structure to look on these questions. What are the contributions and why amateur orchestras are necessary? First, 2 points, the question of health and well-being, as well as the question of education, have already been touched earlier in the presentation by Elena and in the first discussion. But if we go further to the other goals, then we also contribute as amateur orchestras to the quality of education in terms of an universality in education. So education for children is not only the domestic language, the native language. It's not only natural science, it's not only sports and so on. Music and musical education belongs to a universal approach for education. That is an important issue, and amateur orchestras provide excellent examples of how they contribute and how they may achieve educational goals in the society. Then the question of gender equality. In parallel to our forum here, we have just now on that weekend in Frankfurt an important conference organized by BDLO on women in music. Women composer in music, women conductor in music. That is an issue of equality between men and women, and you probably know that in the past, many orchestras, especially professional orchestras, had been dominated by men. So it's changing, and BDLO is trying to encourage this better equality. Another issue of equality, and another example, is that we have integrated in BDLO, meanwhile, 2 LGBTQT plus orchestras that have been founded in Germany in the late 1990s. That is rather uncommon, and it was a difficult process, but we are quite proud now that we have those member orchestras within BDLO. There are only a very few ones around the whole world, less than 10 orchestras in that way. The fourth goal is the goal of reducing the inequalities of life. And of course, amateur orchestras may contribute to a better inclusion of underprivileged children and underprivileged people in general by providing access to musical education, access to play in an orchestra, and access to go to a concert as the audience. That is not a privilege for certain people. It has to be a basic right for everybody, and the amateur orchestras usually provide that opportunity better than the more expensive tickets for professional orchestras, of course. And there are some special schemes on providing discounts for people. So there are a lot of more points. I wanted just to give some little examples on how the variety opportunities are to contribute and to provide necessary input for the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Helge. Okay, now let's really discuss about Helge's presentation. I'm sorry. Takeshi, do you have any opinion, or yeah, you can say in Japanese, please.
Yes, I can speak only Japanese. So by listening to you, my impression is that in Japan, in terms of level of technology or the quality of performance, we tend to emphasize too much the level of performance and technology. By listening to Elena and Yang, you emphasize the power. But in Japan, gradually, I think things are changing. So in the competitions in Japan, like awards, the level of technology and idea, social contribution, are there awards including all those points? Maybe there are, but they're not that prominent. For instance, what I thought are the companies' awards. The level of such values are now starting to be considered in Japan. In case of Germany, I hear that maybe the situation in Germany is close to that of Japan, including SDGs. So in that sense, what is social contribution? Thinking about that, I feel very close to Germany. Maybe we share the same way of thinking. That is all. Thank you.
Jan, do you have any opinion?
No, I think it's interesting, the whole idea of the SDGs and using it for our benefit as well. Do you use it in Germany if you want to convince the government or for other users, or is it just for yourself?
Using the SDG as an argument towards politicians is definitely something which I take home from that forum as a basic structure on talking about and making this contribution visible. Though that is really something which we didn't use so far that much. And I appreciate the idea because it gives it a clear structure. Coming back to the question from Shimoya, I want to point out that amateur orchestras play an important role for certain larger companies in Germany as a soft location factor for qualified employees or qualified researchers or qualified students. So if you decide to apply for a new position in a company and you play an instrument as an amateur, then it might influence your personal decision whether you go to this city or to another one if you know that there is a good orchestra where you can play and perform. And this is the question again of having joy or providing joy for those employees, but for the companies, it's an image question to have such an orchestra to get people attracted. For example, Lufthansa at an airline operates an amateur orchestra. BMW operates a chamber orchestra. Ford, the German car brand, or not the German, but with large branches in Germany, operates an amateur orchestra. SAP, the software manufacturer, operates an amateur orchestra. Though there are many examples, and of course the university orchestras are also examples of that kind of making the company or the institution attractive for employees, for students, for researchers to join this institution in order to have the opportunity to also play in an orchestra.
Elena, do you have any opinions?
So I love the idea that Lufthansa and BMW have orchestras. That makes me happy for some reason. I wanted to go back to the SDGs really quickly, though, because as much as it is about, and 100% as the logistics and concrete elements of an orchestra, we do music with women, or we include LGBTQIA+ members in our group. It's also about kind of how the SDGs are influenced, or how the audience can also make a difference in that too. So the thought of people being more compassionate as a society, and how that leads people to want to contribute to their neighbors and the community as well. So you can kind of stretch the SDGs to fit in bigger than just the concrete and logistical elements of your orchestra, and sort of think more outside the box too, which is always interesting and fun to explore.
Takeshi, do you have any idea or any opinion about SDGs?
Talking about JAO, on the question of SDGs, we have just commenced our study. Helge-san said gender equality. So these are the factors that we were not conscious while we do certain things, but actually it was responding to the calls of SDGs. There are many cases where we reconfirm that. So we think that something brand new is being done. It's not creating some brand new thing, but things we did as something taken for granted, and actually it responded to the calls of SDGs. So that could be the point to relook at this question once again.
Let's move on to the last question. The last question is also very similar to first and second question. For society, what is the significance of orchestra activities? So I want to ask Takeshi to have a presentation.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to talk about the significance of orchestral activities. There are two aspects. One is by participating in orchestral activities, you can create your own life. And number two is by providing music to the audience, you can provide emotional feelings and healings to the audience. And these two aspects cross over in concerts. the performer want to make a good performance, they will cooperate. And by showing that they can provide and share the emotion with the audience and have a sense of achievement. Now let me talk about JAO. One of the features of JAO's activities is musical training and discussions about the management or operations. We place importance on both. In this festival, for example, there are orchestral performance, but also we have a steering committee to exchange views about operation issues and concerns. This has a big significance that the orchestras are operated voluntarily. Let us say amateur orchestra holds a concert. Not only they have to practice, but they must be concerned about selling tickets and also secure musical instruments and places to practice. And that leads to development of teamwork that may lead to better, improved performance. In 1985, JAO started the event called the Toyota Youth Orchestra Camp, or TYOC. So the steering committee is made from the participants and they plan and operate by themselves. The alumni of this program is now 6,100 people, and they now play a central role in the amateur orchestras of many regions, and they're active as future human resources for each region. Another feature of JAO is that in the projects of JAO, there's no participation as a group, but the participants are limited to individuals who are members of a member orchestras. The reason is that JAO projects, in JAO projects, participants can learn from top-class instructors about rendition and expression methods of orchestras and ensembles, or learn through experience, and the outcomes will be taken back to each orchestra that they belong to. That's the first purpose. And in the future, they will play a central role in their orchestra, and they'll be able to raise their performance level and aims to contribute to the development of music culture in each region. JAO is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. 23 organizations, 23 orchestras joined 50 years ago to form this organization. As I mentioned before, in regions that there is no professional orchestra, amateur orchestras play the role of providing music to the citizens. There's no big music halls. There are difficulties in securing musical scores and instruments, but they lit the hearts of the people through music. A regional amateur orchestra start to become a big presence in the culture of each region. Currently, there are 1,000 or even 2,000 amateur orchestras in Japan. Out of those, 130 orchestras are members of JAO. But though the number is small, this covers all the prefectures in Japan. In the Articles of Incorporation of JAO, Article 4, there are 7 contents as the purposes of the organization. And the 4th purpose is a project to support social contribution activities in each region. In terms of social contribution, as we're saying, JAO started to study the method of SDGs. Recently, we made a questionnaire to the 130 members on what approaches are they taking in terms of SDGs. And I've calculated the results by goal. Ranking number 1 is goal 4, high quality education. Ranking number 2 is goal 3, health and welfare to everybody. Number 3 is goal number 11, build a city where they can keep living. We have just started this study, but we hope this could lead us to thinking about the relationship between the orchestra and the society. JAO is also promoting TCC, Toyota Community Concert, aiming at contributing to the promotion of regional culture through music. Together with Toyota Motors and the Toyota sales companies group, VLAMO member orchestras will support regional activities. This strongly supports the social contribution activities of orchestras. And lastly, why were musics born? To express our emotions, and gradually it led to performance as a joint work through conversation and by making harmony and by interacting with each other. The key word is sympathy. I hope someday everybody in the world will be able to have sympathy to each other. That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Helge, do you have any comments or opinions to Takeshi?
You mentioned the figure of how many children have participated in the Toyota Youth Orchestra camps during the past years since 1985. It's a huge number, and so I think this figure shows that the Japanese amateur orchestras are a return on investment for the investment into this Toyota Youth Orchestra camp. So it's incredibly successful story for my understanding. I appreciate that.
Yeah, how about you? You have any opinions?
Yes, well, my question is maybe a little bit off topic, but I was just wondering, in Japan, or the orchestras, do they mix generations, or do you have youth orchestras separated from adult orchestras and senior orchestras maybe, or is it a mixture? And second part of the question is the education of the young musicians. Does it happen in the orchestra or in music school or at primary school maybe? I was just wondering.
Yes, first of all, in terms of age generation, the orchestras are different age generations. There are also mixed orchestras. For the youth orchestra, that is mainly under the age of 18 or under 22, high school or university level. So when you say youth orchestra in Japan or junior orchestra, yes, we do have orchestras with limitations in age, but in case of adults, there are no age limitations. There are cases which children join adults orchestra, and also in adults orchestras, there are people in their 70s or their 80s. In the case of the education for the youth, a feature of Japan is that at the elementary school, primary school, and junior high school and high school, there are club activities, which is very active ever since after the war. This is being reviewed recently, but at least so far, the club activities at schools, they practice together with their friends after school. And rather than practicing alone at home, it is much more effective to practice together with their friends. And they will compete at competitions. So this has expanded and developed in Japan. That was driving force for development in Japan.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time. Also, but I want to share the video message from Beijing, China. So let's watch this video. We have still time to discuss about it. So,
may I continue what I ended? Well, in Japan, we have a system called the Suzuki method, which is very famous. From your very early childhood, you learn something, you practice on an instrument. And then it made people think that you cannot play the violins unless you begin very young and very early. But in university orchestras, you begin to practice, you begin to take up instruments since university days. So I think university orchestras served as an, including Suzuki method. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nauen. I am a founder and conductor of the Beijing International Chamber Orchestra since 2007 until now. I would like to say some important words about the role of the orchestra, any orchestra, as professional, as semi-professional, as a pure amateur orchestra in the society, for the society. I would start with amateur orchestra, why it is important for society. We all know what a lot of people, music lovers, even they spend their childhood or even later years learning music by choosing another profession for the living. They cannot give up with music, and for them it's very important to continue making music. That's why amateur orchestras are essentially important for any society, in any country. I am living in China, and my orchestra, the Beijing International Chamber Orchestra, was the first international semi-professional chamber orchestra ever founded in China. Of course, after us, there were born a lot of other teams, ensembles, and orchestras, but I'm proud to say we were the first here. And as I feel in China, let me speak about China because I'm here. In China, the role of amateur orchestra, of semi-professional orchestra, is extremely huge because it gives possibility as for musicians, as for the audiences, to see close how music is born and to understand what music belongs not only to professional musicians world. People who can play music instrument, who want to express themselves, for them, semi-professional orchestra is a great chance to be involved in the music making. For the society, it's also very important to see what there is no border between an audience and musicians on the stage. When I was a little child, for me, musicians on the stage were such incredibly far people, unreachable. They were magicians, not only musicians. And this huge distance made me feel I will never reach that point where these people are. But I became a professional musician. And truly to say, to work with amateur musicians, I'm enjoying more than with professionals. In one simple reason, because amateur musicians appreciate music very, very much, and they are ready to give the best input in the community orchestra, and they're appreciating every minute of rehearsal much more than professionals. Forgive me, professionals. Well, I am professional too, but working 15 years with a semi-professional orchestra, I know what I'm talking about. Coming back to the topic, why it is so important for amateur orchestra, for semi-professional orchestra to exist. It's one of these points is we are educating the young generation. For example, the Beijing International Chamber Orchestra, since 2007, since we exist, since we were found, we gave a lot of charity performances, supporting orphanages, supporting children with special needs who would never have a chance to come to the real concert hall, not only because of their disabilities, physical disabilities or mental disabilities, but also because of some limitations by most of concert halls, not disturbing the regular audiences. There are some sad limitations exist. And the concerts we are doing for society, for children, for people with disabilities, I think it is great input in our lives. And at the end of my emotional speech, let me say what us, musicians, and our orchestras, our amateur orchestras, our professional orchestras, our semi-professional orchestras, at the moment, we are carrying a very important mission. We are the peacemakers. The Beijing International Chamber Orchestra consists of 35 musicians of 25 different nationalities. Just to imagine. People of different nationalities, different backgrounds. We are doing peace. We learn how to make music, how to understand each other without any political backgrounds. And I'm very proud of my orchestra, of job we are doing. And let me say at the end, I'm Russian conductor. My orchestra consists of many nationalities. And for us, it's very important to carry the message to this world. The music exists for peace and love. Thank you very much.
We are running out of time, so Elena, could you please briefly describe your conclusion, also including the word universality?
My conclusion is that universally, we all need more amateur orchestras in this world. And I think that the panel did a wonderful job of enlightening us on many reasons why. Just a couple of words that came out: cooperation and collaboration, a better and warmer society. I am going to adopt as my own the phrase magicians, not just musicians. I love that, and peace and love, and I think all of those words go together and help support the SDGs and why we can achieve them through more compassion and sympathy, because we want to make the world a better place, and that's where the SDGs come into play and how they intersect with music. So the world needs more amateur orchestras.
Thank you. As a moderator, I'd like to close this panel discussion by borrowing a few words from Her Imperial Highness Princess Takamado. These words are spoken at the IOC meeting precisely 9 years ago. It was a very famous speech among the Japanese people, so please allow me to replace one word in your sentence. It says, "You have in the spirit of the orchestra movement, giving them something about which to dream, giving them motivation. You have, in the spirit of the orchestra movement, giving them something about which to dream, giving them motivation. Isn't this the universality of orchestral activities? Thank you very much, Yang, Helge, Takeshi, and Elena. So let us give a big round of applause for Big Bosses. Thank you very much.
Dear panelists, thank you very much for your animated discussion. We were able to accept questions, but in the interest of time, reluctantly, we have to close this session. The panelists are seated in the front row of this hall, so please approach them during the recess if you have questions. Once again, a big round of applause to express our gratitude to the panelists. Thank you very much.